he's got a lot to lose. I think he has more to lose than he does to gain next week in a weird way.
But don't you think it's like imperative that he runs?
Oh yeah, I think it'd be a terrible judgment play for him not to. You're a running back. This isn't Marv, who was by and large the best player to come out in 2 years on paper. I mean, Cam Skattebo right now is a day 2 grade by most people. 2025 NFL Combine is here. Johnny Venerable, Bo Brock, PHNX Cardinals, and Bo. I remember last Combine. Very different vibes around this group. Last year, it was Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, right? And Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. It was a who's who of names. I remember it was like a star-studded affair. And no disrespect to this class. Last year, it was the flash. This year, a little bit more substance, a little bit more meat and potatoes.
That's right. Well, the real sickos, please stand up when we start to really evaluate the draft class, the NFL scouting combine that's about to descend upon Indianapolis, which is going to become the NFL capital of the world for, 7 straight days. And we're just going to be locked in, right, on defensive front 7 players, because that is going to be the belle of the ball as far as this class goes. Edge rushers, interior defensive linemen, those are going to be the guys that are going to kind of steal the show. Sure, you're going to have kind of a playmaker pop off here and there. You're going to have your Cam Skattebo down, in the week, and we can get into Scat, what we anticipate as far as the Sun Devils running back goes. And then I think you got the quarterbacks, which are kind of a big question mark going into Indy next week. And what should you anticipate? Like, who's going to work out? And then those who do work out, like, how high can they get themselves up the board? Can they work themselves into a position where a team like the Cardinals, who feel set at the top of their quarterback room, is there somebody they'd look at as a developmental quarterback that they could fill out the room with?
Just to show you the stark difference between last year and this year, not to knock this year's group. Last year, though, it was an offensive class, so much so we didn't have a defender drafted, Bo, till Byron Murphy went 16th as a D tackle to Seattle. This year, I'll just pull up some rankings in front of me here. Depending on where you go, and we go with our guy Fran Duffy, 7, 8 of the best players can fit inside the top 15 are defensive players. I mean, that's a conservative estimate. Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Shamir Stewart, Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, James Pierce Jr., Nick Scowerton, Jalen Walker. I mean, you just go on. And then you mix in, you're right, the quarterbacks. What happens with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, right? What happens with our boy T-Mac? T-Mac was left out of Daniel Jeremiah's, his first top 10 picks of his mock draft 2.0. Ashton Genty, does he find his way into the first half of the first round? I do think we're going to get some clarity after this week. I think last year's class, the combine clearly was not prioritized from many of the top dogs. Marvin Harrison Jr., he didn't participate, right? Whereas this year, doesn't feel like a guy like Walter Nolan or James Pierce Jr., if they go out there and they couple their on-field performance with an elite historic combine, something that we're all sitting back, we're like, wow, did you see that? That can cement a guy into a top 10 status. Whereas, if somebody doesn't work out or there's a medical that pops up, it's like maybe they fall from a top 16 guy to a second rounder. I feel like in a weird way, even though the class isn't as star-studded, there's much more on the line this year.
Yeah, the Roma Dunze, last year working out, running 40s and getting himself as either the Bears, second top 10 pick. I think that was necessary for him to do that. And I think you can kind of use it to kind of get a pulse of where, the football world really is as far as Walter Nolan. Does the Senior Bowl hype, does it match? Has it sustained the last 2 weeks, and then what are the workouts going to look like? And then can somebody separate themselves? Like when I look at this edge class, Johnny, and the Arizona Cardinals, absolutely, regardless of what they do in free agency, need to be on the edge. But when you look at the top of it, where you've got James Pierce Jr., where there's, noise coming out about, does he have off the field issues? Mike Green too. You look at these guys coming off, the edge, Michael Williams, you got Jalen Walker, as you mentioned, Shamar Stewart, Nick Scowerton. Who's going to separate themselves by the workouts? Because it's very possible. Who's going to separate themselves? Who are we going to be able to hear from, Cardinals brass or people in that building, what they feel about some of these guys, and who are some kind of the trendy names that you need to start kind of tying to the Cardinals organization throughout the draft process.
Yeah, 2 years ago, it was Will Anderson Jr. and Nolan Smith, right? And then last year, it was a little shimmy from Monty Ossenford after Dallas Turner ran his 40 time. Who's Ossenford going to be dancing about after their combine performance? And speaking of performance, let's shift it quickly to the offensive side. Let's talk Cam Skattebo. Local product, local hero, if you will. And, half of the show believes the Cardinals will be warranted to select him. What's your prediction for the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, or should have been, in Skattebo? 24 touchdowns, 2,300 yards, en route to the university's first Big 12 title. Do you think he's going to be able to differentiate himself? Because I've seen a lot of people speculate he's going to look small, or he's not going to have that explosiveness when compared to other top dogs. Like, what does Cam Skattebo need to do to warrant, in your opinion, a top 50 selection?
I think he's going to have to show off some speed. I think there's probably a number that NFL GMs are going to feel comfortable with. Like you've seen him play now. Like if you're going to see him, what size he potentially is going to play at the next level, where he dropped that weight, as they talked about all along during that college football playoff run, where he's now around like 215. Like, is he going to be able to take the brunt? Is he going to be able to, get around corners and then leave defenders in the dust? I think he's going to have to show off some sort of speed. And I think it's got to be, and I might be being a little too conservative here for him, but, in the, is it sub 4.5 mark?
Wow, that's,
or right around there, like 4.5 mark. I mean, sub 4.6 would probably be a good number for him.
I think it's his burst and short yardage might matter more in terms of like his 20-yard split or whatever it is, like the first 10 to 20 yards. I think if he breaks 4.7, like significant low 4.6s, I think is fine.
Okay.
If he's over 4.7, we've entered the day 3 equation. And I would still take him, and I still think he's meant to be an Arizona Cardinal, and I think the Cardinals would behoove themselves if they pursue him. But if Cam Skattebo looks slow, if he, last time we saw him, he was dominating against Texas, but he was barfing. He was throwing up.
Yeah.
He was having a tough time.
Puke and rally, baby.
Yeah, puke and rally. Like, will he look average next to an Ashton Genty in terms of like the physical attributes? He can help himself exponentially because on tape, outside of a Genty who played in the Popcorn Conference, like he can couple elite tape with a really solid workout. And on the flip side, he can really hurt himself. Like, we know he's a football player. We know he's going to be drafted. We know certain teams, I think, Harbaughs of the world, they'll fall in love with him. But he cannot, he's got a lot to lose. I think he has more to lose than he does to gain next week in a weird way.
But don't you think it's like imperative that he runs?
Oh, yeah. I think it'd be a terrible judgment play for him not to. You're a running back. This isn't Marv, who was by and large the best player to come out in 2 years on paper. I mean, Cam Skattebo right now is a day 2 grade by most people.
Yeah. And one thing I do certainly anticipate is I think, Genty's going to have a large media contingent asking him questions. And I think Cam is going to be a close second, if not maybe even take over Ashton Genty with the intrigue. Like his friend said, like all 32 team fan bases are in on this guy. And I think, front offices are equally like intrigued by it. Like what like if we do our homework and we vet this guy and we can match, some of the stuff that with the tape, as far as, traditionally NFL evaluators go off of, he can do himself a really, good service next week. One last thing as we stay on the offensive side of the football, and I am interested as far as the tackle class and the guard class. I think there's a couple that you could maybe make your case for at 16, definitely at 47 with the Arizona Cardinals and then beyond. But the quarterbacks, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot from Shedeur next week. You're not going to get anything from Cam, and I don't care. Like those are two guys that like they could not show up, and it doesn't change my week at all. But then beyond that, you start to look at Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck and, Jalen Milrose of this class. And it's like, okay, I want to see these guys throw. And I also want to see, like, with Milroe, what the true athleticism is going to clock in at.
I'm in a unique spot where, like, I want to like these guys. It's not an indictment on Kyler Murray and how he finished last year. I just feel like the Cardinals I feel almost they're in a better spot to take a quarterback this year than next year, even though the class might be 20 times better. Isn't that, like, unique and funny to say? Like, I just feel like, given the structure of this team and how it's built, this team is ready to support a backup rookie quarterback. Kyler Murray can come in, play all 17 games, have success, roster's ready, load up in free agency. Oh, and we're going to stash pick 47, or we're going to stash whatever their third round pick is on the depth chart, let a guy develop, and then make a decision. Maybe Kyler Murray forces her hand, double up. Hey, we're good to go. Let's run it back in 2026. Or another second half collapse happens, and suddenly Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart is inserted into a quarterback competition. Maybe they move off of Kyler Murray. I like keeping options open. And I feel like if you back yourself into a corner in 2026, and I will die on this hill, where you feel like, hey, we have to get a guy and we're slumming it. Think about the reality of the situation for a team like the Raiders right now, pick 6, where you're going to have to talk yourself in maybe trading up for a Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, right? Tennessee's there. They don't want to take a quarterback that high. The Browns are mixing it up. Like, the Jets are in the top 10 QB slum. The Cardinals, for the first time in what feels like forever, and this is where Arians and Steve Keim botched this, they had a year left with Carson Palmer where everybody, including this show, knew he was done in 2017. And what did they do? They took a pass rusher out of Temple. They didn't have the gusto to trade up. This year, the Cardinals, you don't need to trade up. Get a developmental guy. You've earned it, Austin Ford and Gannon, but only if you like him. And again, it's going to be hard for me to see Jalen Milroe run around with his athletic skill set and not be intrigued by that kid. I know it's a different story when he's asked to throw the ball 25, 30 times a game, but from a physical standpoint, that's enticing to me.
Like, if Milroe throws himself into a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, like, I think it makes things easier.
Yeah.
If the opposite happens, or say Jackson Dart, who seems to be the trending quarterback on the rise, like, if he throws himself and tests himself into a fringe first rounder, that's bad news if you want a developmental quarterback for the Cardinals, because you're going to have some of those quarterback hungry teams, those teams that maybe want that extra 5th year, that are going to reach for somebody that, has no business really being there, but because of the position and just how the person performed and just the need, that the Cardinals, they'll just end up just taking a player that falls to him because a team in front of him reached.
I'll tell you what, if you take a pass rusher at 16 and you love Jackson Dart and he falls and it's 27, 28 and you want that 5th year option and you want to move up from 47 to go up and get a quarterback, I'm not going to listen. None of us would complain about that.
The old Packers approach there. Yeah, that's the old Jordan Love approach right there. But
and how that's worked out pretty well for the Green Bay Packers, all things considered. We have full-blown combine coverage pertaining to this franchise, the Arizona Cardinals, and more. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to PHNX Sports here on YouTube. We're en route to the Midwest, Indianapolis, the site of the 2025 NFL Combine. Bo and Johnny, we'll see you there.